Hi, everyone. David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at one of the stakes events on the final Saturday of the Saratoga meet. Race 3 is the Grade 2 Flower Bowl, going a mile and 3/8 on the turf course. And Craig, unfortunate situation for a race with the prestige of the Flower Bowl to only get 4 runners signed on. Obviously, a lot of factors playing into this field being as small as it is. Warlike Goddess had been pointing here. She came up with, I believe, a temperature, so she didn't enter, and the field just kind of stayed pretty small. But you never want to see this. Just 4 runners signed on for a Grade 2 stakes race.
No, it's not great. Hopefully it can rebound next year. I mean, there is some quality in the field, but kind of hard to get excited about this one from a betting perspective.
Yeah, and as you can see from my morning line, it feels like 2 horses are going to attract the bulk of support in here, and they faced off last time in the Glens Falls, those being the number 2, McCulic, the winner of that race, as well as the number 4, Amazing Grace. Not that Parnako and Tamahere are bad horses, but they're not the kinds that you would typically support in a race of this stature. It just came up a pretty weak field, so kudos to their connections for at least entering in this spot. Let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this race, and I don't think there's a whole lot to say about this one, Craig. There's really no speed signed on. I mean, the pace projector states that explicitly with that gray flag. We don't show any pace data for the number 3, Tamahere, because she is a European horse, so we don't have any pace data on her. But I'll be honest, I have no idea how this race is going to sort out in the early stages.
No, I guess that would be the one intriguing thing is to see what kind of tactics are used. And I would guess Parnak will probably go from that inside post position, but who really knows in a field like this? The Euro shipper doesn't seem to have a ton of speed, so I don't think it would change things very much. And it's probably going to be a tactical race.
Let's first take a look at those 2 runners that are coming out of the Glens Falls, which is the key prep for this Grade 2 Flower Bowl. And we'll look at the stretch run of that race with McCulic coming through between horses to get the victory. Note the position of the on this day, I believe she was the number 3, Amazing Grace, as she's trying to close from behind. She had some real trouble, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But Craig, McCulic, she did something that too many horses have not done, and that's run down Warlike Goddess, who got the jump on her. Typically, Warlike Goddess is finishing fastest of all in her races, but McCulic able to nail her on the wire this day.
I think McCulic got a great trip in here, saved a lot of ground, had a target and Warlike Goddess. That one maybe moved just a little bit too early that day. McCulic finally delivered on that promise we saw as a 3-year-old from her, winning a big race. Maybe the 1.5 miles was what was right up her alley. She cuts back a little bit here, but not enough to really matter. I mean, we can see she won the Jockey Club Oaks at 1.3 miles as well. So maybe the distance is her whole card. She's obviously a very strong threat to take this race.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the trip last time. It all worked out for Irad Ortiz, just made every right move. In a race where Warlike Goddess got a little too rank in the early stages, was closer to the pace than she typically is. So maybe you could have made some excuses for that one, but take nothing away from McCulic. She's really stepped forward as a 4-year-old that has obviously appreciated her connections, stretching her back out in distance. No doubt that she's the horse to beat in this race. But Craig, the margin between she and Amazing Grace last time out might not actually be as wide in terms of ability as it was on the racetrack, because as we take a look at the past performances of the number 4, Amazing Grace, you'll see some of that trouble line in the Timeform US comments on the right-hand side. And we didn't show this part of the race, but as the field is heading into the far turn, Tyler Gaffleon was trying to get some better forward position than he initially had on her, moving up the inside from last place. And he got into a pretty precarious spot right in behind a long shot leader. And that rival started to back up in his face. And he tried to maneuver between that long shot and McCulic to, maintain his position, but it didn't quite work out. He got badly steadied out of position with this horse all the way back again. And she had to regather herself and make up ground at the end of this race. She actually ran a lot better than that 3rd place finish might indicate.
I would agree. And the speed figure's not far off, just a point below. And When I look at this race, it kind of, I think back to the pace projector and that no speed label and how McCulic was able to have a target last time. And I think it worked to her advantage. I wonder if those tables aren't going to be reversed here. It's almost impossible to think Amazing Grace could get another tough trip in such a small field. And it seems like she'll be the one with the target this time. And that target's probably going to be McCulic. So I do think she's got a big chance. A lot of time in these no speed races, and actually the reason we made these labels is the horses with the stronger finishing kicks are able to just stay right there in shouting range and make their big move in the stretch. So I think she has just as good a shot as the favorite to take this one.
She is trained by Christophe Clement, who does have another horse in this race, the number one Parnako. We'll take a look at her most recent start in the Robert G. Dick Memorial at Delaware. And she got a pretty good trip in this race, was able to save ground in the pocket early, had her chance in the stretch, just wasn't quite as good as a couple of fillies that finished ahead of her on this day. She's a horse who has definitely appreciated stretching out in distance. She's run two of the best races of her career in her last couple of starts, going the mile and 3/8. This is just a step up in class, even with the short field, Craig. McCulic and Amazing Grace have just faced better horses.
It is. And that 120 speed figure, even as the person who made it, I have to wonder just how, I won't say it's not accurate, but it came over a very soft turf course. You can see it's only a 5 on the Timeform US track condition rating. And even that 120 wouldn't really be competitive with the top two if you think she could reproduce it over the turf course on Saturday. I would think her best chance is just go to the front like the pace projector shows and try to steal it. We've seen that happen many times on the NYRA circuit where horses are just allowed to lope on the front end and have a lot left for the finish. But even if she were to do that, I'm not sure she's good enough to hang on.
And potentially an interesting factor in that pace projector that was not shown is the number 3, Tamahere, as we'll take a look at her past performances. Because, Craig, in Europe, she's a horse that had shown speed, if you want to call it that. I mean, she had gone to the front in a few of her races when she's been successful. I think 3 of her victories were achieved in gate to wire fashion, just making all the running on the front end. Sometimes that European speed doesn't translate to American races, but this is not your typical American race because there is no speed signed on here. So I would think if Jack Sisterson and Javier Castellano want to go to the front, they could probably make the front end in this race. I just wonder how good she is. She was also entered in an allowance race earlier this week at Saratoga where she looked like a better fit. Don't blame the connections for rerouting from that spot to this one instead, because why not take a shot when you have the chance to get some grade 2 black type?
Yeah, you just really have to wonder about the quality of those races she's been running in England. It's, we see horses ship over all the time from listed stakes that do well even in graded stakes, but these races are even a few steps below that. Her time form ratings are her best ones come on the synthetic. She hasn't really shown any form going this far. So she's not for me. Maybe some people want to take a flyer on the Euro import, but this one just seems way over her head to me.
Yeah, I did look up some trainer stats for Jack Sisterson with foreign shippers coming over to this country, and it's a very small sample, but just wanted to point this out because he's not a trainer that you typically think of as having success with these kinds of horses at all. Like, I honestly couldn't remember any off the top of my head, but he is 3 for 9 with foreign shippers over the past 5 years, 33% with a decent ROI, and he's definitely a trainer that's had some success taking shots with long shots in stakes races before. So let's throw up our picks for this Flower Bowl, Craig, and we're on the same page here. There's not too much to dissect in this race. You're basically choosing between McCulic and Amazing Grace, unless you're getting really creative in this spot. And I think we both felt the same about Amazing Grace's trip last time.
Yeah, I think she had a tougher trip. I think that margin could have been much closer than what it was. And I also think she's the one that will have the target to run at. And I think that makes a difference in these races without speed. Maybe McCulic will be in an uncomfortable position of taking the lead earlier than she wanted. So just for price reasons, I probably would call it a 50-50 toss-up, and Amazing Grace is going to be a bigger price.
Yep, both Craig and I have got the number 4, Amazing Grace, on top in the grade 2 Flower Bowl on Saturday at Saratoga. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.